You ready? Always love around the corner. I ask IT. You ready?
You want to make sure we know.
I'll fix it. All right, this being the appointed time and place and seeing a quorum present, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you could all please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Jamie, would you please take the roll?
Tony Arnett,
Present?
Mike Higgins,
Here.
Lori Collins,
Here.
Diana Johnson,
Here.
Tina Johnson,
Here.
David Schrader,
Yes.
Dave Smith,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Here.
Craig Moore.
Thank you. This brings us to the first part of the agenda for public input. If there are members present of the public who'd like to address the board on any subject, either virtually or physically. I don't see anyone here in the room. Do we have anyone online?
No.
All right. Then we will move to our budget hearing. Notice is hereby given to the qualified electors of the Watertown Unified School District that the budget hearing will be held at the Educational Service Center, 111 Dodge Street, Watertown, Wisconsin, on Monday, the 24th of October, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. So this evening is our annual formal budget presentation, and it always feels weird that we're doing a budget in October for a year that started in July. But that is the nature of the beast in terms of reconciling state funding and property assessments and such, so here we are. I have a few top-line observations I'd like to offer about this year's budget. Number one, it's balanced. Number two, the total levy amount that we're asking for in terms of property taxes is less than last year. It's a lower levy than last year. Number three, the millage rate is significantly less than last year. What that means, fourthly, is that on average, taxpayers will see a decline in their school portion of property taxes. Again, I'll emphasize on average, depending on how your property changed in value compared to your neighbors and the city overall, there is room for difference. But on the average, the proposed budget that we will see this evening, a lower levy amount, a lower millage rate, and on average, a lower property tax bill from the district for the taxpayers of the city and the district. That's the end of my introductory comments. I will now turn it over to Mr. Williamson to go through the formal review of the presentation.
I mean, that's pretty much it. Any questions?
Done.
That's in a nutshell. Let's get Tyler, you're gonna pull up the working on it. That really is the essence of the budget in a nutshell. But I will go through some additional points about revenues, expenditures, of course, and the actual budget itself, and then spend the majority of any time really on the points about the levy, as mentioned. Oh, I didn't know I had that. I didn't. Okay, so,
So good to see you again.
I'm not even clicking.
That was me.
Yeah, I was excited. All right, that's fine. Okay, so as this is kind of the same thing as last year, but you know that the budget is essentially a combination or a triangle or a pyramid of these three aspects: revenues, expenditures, programming. It really used to be expenditures that would drive programming, and thus the mill rate. That's really flipped in the last 20 years. It's really revenues that end up driving programming and expenditures just based on the way the state's formula is set up. So I start with the revenues here, since that is the more important sides of the triangle. And really, the majority of our revenue comes from a single source, and that's really our revenue limit formula. Okay, so nearly 85% of our revenues are tied up in either state aid or property taxes. That's there on the left. And on the right is that breakdown between state aid and property tax. We are more heavily we have more state aid than we do property taxes. And that property tax number there in the green, that number is down about 5% this year. So we were at around 38% funded by property taxes last year due to greater state aid this year. And part of the reason why property taxes are falling, more state aid means less of that green portion from our property taxes. And that's a good thing. We want our state aid to be maximized on a yearly basis as much as possible. For those new to the show, this is really the equation that drives that revenue limit formula. So you see for us, we budgeted about 52 million in revenues this year, and almost 44 of that comes from the revenue limit formula itself. And these are the predominant pieces of that. Membership, our revenue per, they call it per member, it's really per student. We get some non-recurring revenues. Those are things like our operational referendum, for example. We get a declining enrollment exemption as part of that 8.7 million. And then we've got our transfer of service, which is a recurring transfer of service is a line item we took advantage of this year, as you can see from past history. That is when students move into our district and they need additional services, either through English learning or special education. We're able to bring in some additional revenue to help with that. But even with that, we're keeping the mill rate and taxes lower than last year. So again, good story there. And that's in our base now forever. So even if those students would leave or move or hopefully graduate from within the district, those dollars would be there forever built into our base formula. This is just a smorgasbord color from this far away, but it is how much of our revenue limit what our revenue limit formula is comprised of. So the big blue there is the state aid formula. The orange there is property taxes. The gray, that's gray, I believe, is our open enrollment exemptions. So a couple things here that I just want to mention. That gray, that open enrollment exemptions, declining enrollment exemptions has been growing. That's a number that once our once our membership flattens out, that gray there is going to disappear. Okay, so we want it to disappear. We don't want to be on that. We don't want those exemptions, but they will be something that we have to deal with when they do disappear. So the important thing to note here is that even though our revenue limit is higher than it has been, you'll notice by the black dots that our mill rate is dropping. And the reason that is because you take out the blue, that's really what our property taxes are doing. And so again, to see a dip there here in 22-23, to see property taxes fall off is a positive thing for the community. The two most important factors of the revenue limit formula, and just some things to keep in mind, is membership and the per pupil amount. All I want to say about this is the membership. Our membership is a 3-year average. And that 3-year average I'm going to get into a second because it's important to note a trend that's happening there. And then our per pupil amount, the floor in the state is 10,000. Ours is 10,015, basically because of some shifting in the formula. But essentially, we are at the floor as far as how many dollars we receive per student compared to the rest of the state. So when you look ahead at biennium budgets, from the state, what you want to pay attention to is the per pupil floor increasing. That's increasing. That's a good thing for Watertown. Obviously, with memberships driving so much of our revenue limit, here's the historical, at least going back 8 years or so, of what our membership has been doing. The orange is growth. For Watertown, the gray is growth for the state. You'll notice everything as far as growth is under 0. So the state has not been growing, Watertown has not been growing. That's a theme everywhere. But you can see what the effect of 2021 had on our FTE. That was a drop that was really not in the forecast. We did studies a few years ago now. And so this is principles like this. I can probably get requests for this tomorrow, right, Jason? Principals like to see kind of what the numbers are, what the trend has been, and we can project those out as well. But obviously, as you're looking at classes and how they're growing, you're following the colored lines, right, from one year to the next. You're not going straight down, you're kind of going on that diagonal. And really all that's happening here is that we have large classes falling off, the 12th graders falling off, and smaller classes coming on, and thus the transition grades. Usually when you pick up some private school students or any families transitioning, they just aren't as large as they have been. And so that's really all we're seeing here. The head count actually isn't that large, compared to what was forecasted. The cohort survival method actually showed a drop of another 50 students, and we didn't have that. So that's a really good thing. I think overall, there were only 2 grades that ended up falling, ended up having less students. Everywhere else, there was growth from one grade to the next. So good survival rates, that are stabilizing after 2021. So hopefully further stabilization occurs, and we get to see some of those exemptions disappear, and we start to see revenues then climb again. We did see the same thing. So in our FTE count, when you talk about membership, it's not just a head count. It's a complex, because everything has to be complex. It's not just counting kids. You are looking at your residents. You're looking at who's here from out of the district. You're subtracting those out. You're adding in residents who had gone somewhere else. It's a whole membership thing. But the membership did drop a little more than we expected. That's because, if you recall from last month, you did have open enrollment out drop. Well, open enrollment out are residents that would count towards our membership. So what that typically means is that those open enrollment out students, either they moved out of Watertown and they moved into the district that they're now attending, or they went private school route or something like that, where they fell off of Watertown's radar from that regard. So we did see a further drop in FTE, but that did caused our open enrollment exemption on the revenue side to increase more. Again, it's something that we eventually have to turn around. But you can see the significance of 1920, and that's going to be falling off the formula moving forward. And so that's going to have repercussions from a revenue standpoint, specifically next year. Finally, on the revenue side, we are seeing, I mean, this is like, I guess, a really nice way to say it. We're seeing stabilizing declines. It's a really nice way to put it. We still are seeing declines, but it's not as steep. But most classes grew, and the fallout goes at the 1920 FTE. That was that big one before the big drop. That's going to fall off the formula. That means we're going to lose a lot of that open enrollment exemption revenue. See, I keep saying open enrollment. Membership exemption revenue that we saw this year. It's going to significantly decline next year. And we know that this is the last year of the operating referendum on the revenue side. We will have to dip into fund balance, to eliminate deficits moving into next year, depending upon where the 23-25 biennium budget comes in and some other membership numbers as well. But just be prepared for that for next year. But that's next year. This year, good news and balanced budget. Let's move on to expenditures. Just real quickly, I won't spend a ton of time on this side of things, but everyone should know at least that we are obviously a very service industry, service heavy. Majority of our expenditures are going to be in the salaries and benefits. So that's what shows on the left. Everything else that we spend our dollars on is in orange. And on the right is just a further breakdown of where those salary and benefits go amongst our employee groups. Impactful expenditure items. We continue to see that gap between where we had projected health insurance costs to go versus where they actually are and where they are now budgeted for this year. again, that's a major reason as to why we've been able to operate really well underneath this operating referendum these past 5 years. That's a huge storyline. The ESSER expenditures, we've had some questions by the public as far as why are your expenditures going up this year versus last year, even though the tax levy is falling? Well, part of it is we have ESSER dollars to spend. And so there's over $2 million in ESSER expenditures in the budget, and that's clearly going to drive up costs. Voucher students is another reason why expenditures go up, even though there's an offsetting revenue. There's almost $600,000 more in voucher student payments. We saw the special education side of voucher payments increase more than double, which was a really significant move. So when you're talking $2 million in expenditures on ESSER, $500,000, $600,000 on vouchers, those dollar amounts add up pretty quickly as to why expenditures are higher, but we have the revenue on the other side of it. And simply expenditure considerations moving forward, we are capped this year for our health insurance cost at 6%. It would have been a 15% increase. So a huge, major props on making sure we got those caps in there, because that would have been a significant increase. We just have to be aware that those caps are for 23 and again for 24. And then once the caps get released, the question is what will happen to rates then at that point. So you got to be strategizing before that happens to minimize that impact as much as possible. We know that CPI wages were significantly higher than they have been, obviously with inflation. We know where they're trending for next year, so just be aware of those pieces as well. And we still have a lot of ESSER funds to still spend, and so we're going to see expenditures rise, even more the next year, but it's all going to be covered by this offsetting revenue as well. So we'll be prepared to answer, hey, why are expenditures going higher? We got ESSER funds to continue to spend. Okay. So just a quick breakdown then of what we see on both the revenue side and the expenditure side, balanced out very nicely. We've got some nice capital projects put in there for the district, some service projects, construction services in there as well, to be able to utilize these dollars as the good stewards we are for our public taxpaying dollars.
Mike, a quick question just on that slide.
Yeah.
When you just look at the salaries and the benefits, do we have I assume benefits include holiday, vacation, 401k, healthcare, FICA, work comp, whatever factors in there. Do we have I'm going to say a target or a industry standard as far as what that percentage is compared to what a individual actually takes home as $1 in their pocket, i.e. we pay $1, but it costs the district $1.40. That 9.5 is 43% of higher than the 21.8 million. And I didn't know if there was anything that you look at to try to keep those in line with each other, or if that's just not something that's on your radar.
So we haven't done a deep dive into benchmarking benefits to any particular standard that we want to be at. Obviously, we just got done with the salary study to know where that's benchmark is, which we're very favorable in. On the benefit side, we know, from my standpoint, I know that our pension payment, FICA, long-term disability, and life insurance are pegged to salary. And so
that ratio would always stay
so that's going to
constant.
stay
Right, those are all
relatively
percentages of that, right, okay.
Yeah. On the health and dental side, we haven't gone into that deep dive to know. I do know that we have favorable benefits and that they perform very well for our employees, but that's going to have to be studied deeper as we get towards that 24 cap being lifted. Dental is not a major portion of the budget, but so it's really, what you're really asking is health and what portion of health should be benchmarked. I don't have that answer for you.
Thank you.
If you're wondering why this is here, because it has to be. We utilize Fund 80, which is a community service fund. The community needs to know where those dollars could potentially go to. These are all ideas that maybe have been used in the past, with the yellow being the ones that we utilize the most for Fund 80. There is a fund balance there that is slowly growing. We do service a pool for the community, and so to have a fund balance there is appropriate. The question is going to be at, when you get to those repairs and things like that, Fund 80 will be able to handle that, and you just have to decide if there's any other options you want to open up to Fund 80 in the future. But as far as our financials go, we typically need to give this sort of breakdown and what we've been levying, and that levy could continue to fall if you want it to in the future. But there's a pool to be mindful of there as well. Finally, the good news of everything. The mill rate is going to fall. There's a lot of information on this particular slide. I'm not going to go and read it to you. I think we read it last year. If you're curious on how the mill rate works, that's really what it is. On the right, you have evaluations of each of our municipalities and what share that they bring in from our property taxes. So we have last year's share and this year's share. So that movement, you can see, for example, more of the share is going to go to the town of Watertown than last year. That's just how the market fared out this past year. Okay, so people are wondering, it's a complex thing of, you said it was 731. I take my property and I take the thousands in it and I multiply it by 731 and I don't get that. It's because there's some complexity behind the formula and how share is broken out between municipalities. The only point on this particular slide is that, and as Tony said at the beginning, we are responsible for the school district portion of property taxes, not the entire property tax bill. And so when we look at it, our property tax portion, and this is a real property tax bill, I believe from Dodge, is 33%. And so the majority of the property taxes are elsewhere. We're going to do our part this year in making sure our portion of the property taxes are down. And some area comparisons, and we don't have this year, so this is only last year. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is where we stand with our individuals in the area. So again, reflecting last year's at the 890. It is important to note, and this is top 10 and bottom 10 as far as membership goes and where we stand. It's important to note that the majority of these districts had property valuations last year that increased either at the state average or higher. We last year did not have property valuation that increased above the state average. We were actually, I think, a third of what the average was last year. And so we weren't able to take advantage of the mill rate drop that many districts were able to take advantage of until this year. So now this year we should be back in line and in a much more favorable position with 731, which either whether you're looking at top 10 bottom districts from membership wise for Watertown or even in the area. Okay. And that's again, and our state aid increased significantly this year, more than some area as well. Again, just a mill rate composition. And you can look at that at your leisure. I'm trying to fall asleep tonight. And finally, for those who are writing an article in the newspaper, these are the highlights. 730, a balanced budget and all those good things. We've got, even with inflation, we've got a balanced budget, strong fund balance, gives us time to consider any future maneuvers that need to be made. We've got a declining tax levy. The 731 is essentially the new 898, right? If we had said 898, at the beginning of the referendum, if it would have been 898 this year, taxes would have gone up $225 on average per person. We're dropping them $68 per person on average across municipalities. And so that's almost a $300 swing by making sure that we kept that mill rate nice and low and not the 898 mill. We'll be able to pay off some debt if we so choose and really create some fiscal flexibility moving forward with the referendum falling off, state aid increasing, declining enrollment exemptions, all those things happen. We have flexibility moving forward to keep that mill rate nice and stable and yet still leave our options open for the future.
All right, thank you, Mike. Again, this portion of this meeting is our public hearing on the budget. So for those individuals present in person or online who would like to address the content that has just been presented, I will now open up the public hearing. I don't see anyone here physically. Do we have anyone online?
No.
All right, then I will officially close the public hearing. And we can go ahead and proceed to our regular agenda. First preview of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda for this evening?
No.
All right, thank you. Next, again, another opportunity for public input, but seeing what we just heard in terms of public hearing, I don't believe we have any. So therefore, we will move on to announcements and recognition / communication. Superintendent?
Do you have a student board representative coming?
Okay. We'll return when, yes, yeah, we're a few minutes early, so it's fine.
I do have 3 acknowledgements and in order of thanks to give out to 3 businesses. State Bank of Reesville donated $1,000 to our Skills USA Club. Kusel Equipment donated $1,250 towards our Skills USA Club. And Eaton Corporation donated $5,000 towards our Skills USA Club. And I really want to thank them for the support of the schools. It is, imperative that, we have partners within our business and our community to help us with programs like these. And so thank you very much for those businesses who stepped up and donated to this cause. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm just going to hand these over. We'll circulate them so you can take a look. Any other communications to address at this time? But again, we do expect a student representative. So when they're on or in, then we'll return to them at that time. Okay, with nothing else under that, we will move on to strategic discussion. So again, returning to the presentation we just had, and there's not a second version.
I just do it again. I just do it again.
So again, I'll just highlight a couple of things. In a year in which everybody's feeling the inflation, in which many households are feeling the pressure from a variety of places on their wallets and making ends meet, I'm glad that as a district, we're able to come forward with a responsible budget. It's balanced, but one that also delivers a lower tax levy, a lower millage rate, and on average, a lower tax bill from the district for our taxpayers. And I think that's a very, very good thing. One comment that I would like to make in terms of the particulars of the presentation, the slide that spoke to the health insurance changes. And just to make sure that everybody's clear that graph went down this way instead of up this way because of actions taken by the district. So the first action we took approximately 4 years ago was to change our payments processor. And because of extra discounts they were able to negotiate with providers and more efficiency, we chopped, if I recall, roughly about $1 million off the annual bill that year. And then the big change was moving from self-funded, meaning we were the insurance company, to fully funded and using Quartz Network as our insurance provider. And it was that change that also brought in the negotiated multi-year contract that kept us at lower rates for this year and for next year and for next year. So those 2 things are actions the district took to move us away from what was an escalating out of control healthcare cost curve and get us to a point where it's been stable here for a number of years. And that's going to, again, we know there's portions of that that's going to be challenged in about 2 years when we have to go back out and see what the rates are, but it's been very good for us thus far. Other board members with comments or questions about the presentation that you saw?
Is one of the colorful graph that he had of the grade level the right term.
Membership.
Headcount.
Cohorts.
Headcount, but the
Cohorts,
the
yeah.
cohorts.
Yep. cohort
With
analysis.
it, of that we've been continuously over the last several years dropping off our big classes.
Yes.
Last year was the last year that we dropped off our 300+ headcount senior class.
Correct.
With it, that there is two things that come out of that, is that to me, I see that next year will be the year that we're going to flip this curve, in which we're not going to be declining and we're going to be increasing, and a lot of kudos to what we're doing. That, like we said, there's only 2 of those cohorts that went down. That means the rest of them all went up. Well, they're, whatever it is, 10 of them all went up, which is kudos to everything that we've been doing to continue to grow enrollment. That's the real numbers of what we're able to grow enrollment with, so.
Other comments or questions on the presentation? Anyone? Nope. Okay. So we'll take a step back and recognize our student representative and hear what's going on at the high school.
Okay.
Go ahead and
High
introduce
school
yourself. Thanks.
I'm Andrew Scheid,
Thank you, Andrew.
senior at the high school. Thank you for having me back. So some happenings this month at WHS. We are halfway through the trimester, making us 1/6 of the way through the school year. Fall sports are starting to wrap up. The boys football and boys soccer teams played their last games, and cross country ran at their last meets. The girls volleyball team celebrated a win at Slinger this Saturday, making them regional champs. Also this month, the German Honor Society hosted the first German American Week, where they held a guessing contest with Lindt chocolate balls, and whoever guessed the closest took home the whole jar. They also hid Hannah the German Bear, and whoever found it got a special chocolate prize. Finally, they hosted daily German trivia over the announcements, where daily winners got gummy bears, and the overall winners of the week got root beer floats, which is won by Frau Schneider, the German teacher's person.
Nice.
Some dress up days that we have coming up. Today was flannel day. Tuesday is sweater weather. Wednesday is pink out for breast cancer awareness. And next Monday is Halloween, which is costume day. A few shout outs here. The AP Lit teacher, Mrs. Suski, for helping our seniors apply to colleges by walking them through the process and revising essays. And the National Honor Society tutoring heads, Emily Ryan and Michaela Fessler, for organizing and offering tutoring to any students during ELT, our extended learning time, and after school on Wednesdays. Future events ahead. This Wednesday, NHS is hosting Trunk or Treat at the high school, where they are giving books and candy out to elementary school kids in our district. Rake Fest, which is hosted by Interact, is happening November 5th, which is their biggest community service event of the year, going around raking at people's lawns. Fall Fest is later in November, also hosted by Interact. And then looking further into the future, Interact Chicago trip is coming up to visit museums. We have Call an Elf, Do Be Nice Week, and Teacher Appreciation Week. And that is all I have. Thank you, guys.
A lot going on. Thank you very much. All right, we'll return to the normal flow, and next up is reports, starting with the superintendent report.
Mike, I'll leave the clicker.
So October, we have had a ton of recognitions. That's why we've entitled the slide Recognitions Galore. There's National Custodian Day earlier in the month. Of course, the school board week that we had earlier in the month on October 5th was World Teachers Day. The 10th through the 14th was School Lunch Week, National School Lunch Week. 17th through the 21st was National Bus Safety Week. All month long, we celebrate our building principals because October is National Principal Month. And then Also, I'd like to say a shout out to all of these wonderful people who are bringing a new opportunity or newer opportunity to the middle school and high school. These people have engaged in a train-the-trainer in restorative practices. We talk a lot about changing the culture and climate and discipline and bullying in our schools. And this is a solid research-based way to look at how we're going to do that. We'll be giving you a lot more information on restorative practices and what we mean, because if you look them up out there, you might see some stuff that is favorable to you or not favorable to you. When we say restorative practices, we mean something special within education, and we want to make sure that you understand that. So we will be bringing you some more information. But I just wanted to put a shout out along with all that other information that you saw, throughout the month of people that we are lifting high. I want to lift these people high because this is a hard push that we're trying to change culture within our school buildings. One thing that I would like you to know before we get into important dates. We do have an important update that is between October 1st and December 1st. We are required by law to submit our seclusion and restraint data. You already saw the data in July. We gave you the presentation. By law, we're required to do that and submit the information to the Department of Public Instruction. The reason I have this slide in here and the reason I gave you this information is because we gave you the information back in July. If somebody asks because they see something in the news, at least you have a frequently asked questions document that you can go back to, or some other information about seclusion or restraint, just to refresh your memory. So that's why I have that information there for you. And then lastly, some important dates for you to know. This week, we have October 27th and 28th are non-student days, with the staff development day being on October 27th. Thanksgiving breaks coming up, in which we won't have any school on the 21st through the 25th. And then those committee dates. But lastly, the state convention is coming up in January. It's January 18th to the 20th. And we would really like board membership to help and attend. You learn a lot about other school districts, you meet a lot of other school board members, and you can ask them what they're doing or what key things are happening in their school district. And you'll be surprised to know that they're dealing with many of the same issues that we are, or that we want to take and look at. And maybe they'll have some ideas for you. So if you can, please let Jamie know by November 15th if you're planning to attend. That way we can get registration information in. You don't even have to stay overnight. We're close enough that if you want to drive into Milwaukee for just a day, come in and join the activities for the day and then go home. Or if on the contrary, you're busy during the day, but you want to come in the evenings, there are plenty of activities that are in the evenings and ways for you to get to know and talk to other school board members. So again, it's a pretty open environment, but let us know your intent. That's all I have. Any questions?
Jamie, please remind me, did we appoint a delegate to that convention?
We do. It's been a little bit since we did that small.
Yeah,
But yeah, the top of my head, I'll just look it up here.
Yeah, I was trying to remember for the organizational meeting we appointed one.
Yeah, I'll just pull up the document here and then I have that information.
It was you, wasn't it?
No, it's definitely. Definitely.
Let's see here.
So one portion of that meeting is a representative, formal delegate from each of the districts attends the actual formal convention hearing where there are the resolutions that have been proposed to the organization as a whole, and you vote on those.
It's Doug.
It's Doug. Thank you, Doug. So you should receive in advance, generally by December, they send out to all board members a list of the resolutions. You have the opportunity to review those resolutions, and I encourage you to do so. And if you have specific feedback, we have not historically as a board reviewed them and said yay, nay, yay, nay, yay, nay. We just, if individual board members have specific feedback on particular resolutions, then you forward it to our delegate, I would, and then the delegate, if they hear a pattern, but then we might bring some forward to the board, but otherwise, that's what it is. So it is an important feature of that convention, are those votes on those resolutions. All right, thank you very much for that report. Okay. Committee reports. Starting with HR. Sorry, this was the first.
Yep. We met this past Wednesday. The committee was all there, as well as Dr. Burke, myself, and Bill Surrey, building supervisor. Went through the committee reports. One big action item from there is bringing forward Fund 21 expenditures. A couple times a year, just take a look at what those are. That has now been a practice, so we'll do that twice a year on the donation side. The variance report is the first variance report of the year. We're 1 quarter in. I just made a note that it's a little difficult to compare last year, this year. We have one more payroll on the books this year versus last year, just where the Fridays fell. But that we use that variance report in fine tuning the budget for tonight. We did have C.G. Schmidt then give a pretty in-depth, I think, conversation or presentation, I should say, about the different options we have for the air conditioning. As you know, right now, we're out to bid on that through C.G. Schmidt, and they will be bringing bids back to the Finance Committee on the 16th of November, and everything goes according to plan from there. A resolution will be brought forward to the board that last Monday, November, after Thanksgiving holiday for action. And we made sure that C.D. Schmidt was going to provide us the different reports that we needed and questions about, for example, ongoing costs on a yearly basis, things like that, that C.D. Schmidt would be able to handle. We did bring forward one $20,000 expenditure that made its way to a resolution tonight. We are waiting for some additional quotes on that, but we would like to get it in before the snow flies, which is new playground mats and new wood chips in all the elementary schools. So we are asking tonight then for a resolution for a not to exceed dollar amount and contingent upon Bill getting a couple other quotes and including those emails, so I know they're out there, and we're just waiting for the numbers to come back on mats and wood chips. That's something that sorely needs to be done. Certainly, yes, elementary. We had a construction management conversation. Given transition that's occurring, Dr. Burke specifically asked about the relationship that we can have with the construction manager for the remainder of this year, as far as major projects that we still need to get to this year. Knowing our buildings through this process with the AC, just talking about what a potential transition can look like and making sure we have a nice relationship with our construction manager moving forward for this fiscal year. So the committee agreed, with Dr. Burke, and that he's going to follow up with some potential options for us to consider and move forward with construction management, additional projects this year. And then finally, you saw really the presentation, which is with what we've been talking about the last few months, which is the budget and the tax levy. So the next meeting is before the Thanksgiving week, a little earlier on the 16th, with the board meeting on the 28th.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Sorry. Chairman Well?
No comments or questions.
Comments or questions on that report? Please.
So noticing the resolution for the wood chips, there's a discrepancy, there's a difference in the not to exceed amount.
Certainly not intentional.
I was just curious about that versus the quote.
Oh, no, so the quote is for all this additional components of that they gave us, like the swing components and replacement parts. What I'm pulling out of this particular quote is the swing mats and the wood chip fiber. So it's just that 13.1 and the 28.6 for a total of 41.7. Is that what I put in there? Yeah,
Yes.
41.7.
All right, any other comments or questions in that report? Very well. HR?
Yes, we held our meeting. We had all members present. Others present with us were Dr. Burke, Margaret Brady, and we also had the USI benefits consultant, Al Yeager. And so first we started off, we reviewed our consent agenda, in which we have a resolution for that tonight for appointments, resignations, retirements, and terminations. Mr. Yeager gave us a nice presentation as far as the health insurance performance report and renewal. Some of the things that Mike had alluded to as far as the budget information and things like that. So currently we have the court's health insurance plan, and our 2023 renewal includes the 6% premium increase because we have the contractual caps. Without the caps, the estimated increase would have been 14.6%. And so through this, Mr. Yeager emphasized the importance that, once our cap falls off, we're going to really need to take a look as far as like health, wellness, consumer education for the plan subscribers, how the health insurance is used, and taking a look as far as the committee discussed possible education ideas, including sessions during PD days. The USI will help us and kind of pull some materials and things like that together. Dr. Burke suggested an employee committee that will work on the development and promotion of cost-saving ideas and strategies, and will work with the administration to be able to put something together for us. Then we went on to the employee satisfaction survey activity report, and Ms. Brady presented an overview of activities and programs. We had a nice breakdown as far as by school and the different things that they are taking a look at to create positive culture and climate for staff and students. And then we discussed different aspects of school culture and various survey strategies to achieve the most meaningful results. So we took a look as far as we talked about different information, questions, and things like that, a design of the survey. And so Margaret will talk to Bill Foster from School Perceptions, who does the survey, as far as to be able to provide more information at an upcoming meeting. We also talked about shifting the survey timeline and design discussion a little bit from March to a February agenda to be able to give us a little bit more time in case there were changes that needed to be made to the process. And Ms. Brady will arrange for the committee to hear more about restorative practices and responsive classrooms. So that will be an upcoming education piece for one of our HR committee meetings. Our committee agenda planning, we talked about future items. And through that, we will be having at our HR committee meeting in November, Dr. Vitale is going to be presenting educator effectiveness system. And so that helps us to take a look as far as how our staff evaluated and things like that. So we wanted to know more about those details. So that that information will be coming forth at our next meeting on Monday, November 14th, 5:30 p.m.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions in that report? Moving on then to Ed Services.
Yes, Ed Services had their meeting on October 11th. All committee members are present, plus a couple of extra board members, as well as most of the principals. The two major topics were Ready, Set, Go conferences, as well as extended learning time. Presentations were given by the principals related to those, and those were well received by the board. There were a couple of remaining outstanding questions and action items, which Dr. Vitale noted, and we will circle back in November. Otherwise, I will then direct you to the tentative schedule that was sent out in July time period. And next up for us to discuss in November is the program of studies preview proposal. as well as the state report card, which we're all eagerly awaiting, which probably a few people in the room already have, but we're not allowed to see. So every on bated breath, waiting to find out what that looks like. And then standing action item is ESSER plan updates, anything related to educational services that requires the expenditure of money in the near term. We want to make sure that we're out in front of it so that we don't miss the deadline or have missed expectations regarding how long it takes to get something done. And that, for the most part, is educational services in a nutshell. Next meeting is on November 8th. Any comments, Dr. Vitale, additional?
We'll be at the high school, that detail out to you, closer to the date. And we'll note that the official release of the report card is actually November 15th. Our meeting is
So we won't still get it.
Yeah.
Rats. We'll have to put something else on the agenda then.
But there's no shortage of things.
Any other comments or questions on that report? Hearing none, then policy review, still to you.
Sure. The meeting minutes that happened on October 12th, all board members were present with a couple of others. For the most part, high level discussion at the front end, and I want to direct your attention to Dr. Burke's board update. We are now going to be listing the policies that are going to be reviewed in that for you to consume and be aware of. So when you know they're coming up, that gives you the opportunity to attend. It gives you the opportunity to comment. Just know that we only meet bi-monthly. We don't try to bite off more than we can chew, so we will be developing a backlog. The other concept that we floated out there was one of a sponsor. So for example, Mike, if you really wanted to know why, we have to serve chicken in the cafeteria and there's a policy about chicken in the cafeteria, you can ask a question about chicken in the cafeteria and you become the de facto sponsor of that. That doesn't mean you have to do anything except for to come to a board meeting, a subcommittee meeting, and then hopefully give some flavor, no pun intended, to the discussion so that we understand it. Now, with that, that means Dr. Burke will then take that, work within applicable laws, what WASB recommendations are, where we've been, where we're going, and then circle back with probably some edits. So this gets us out of, board members don't have to edit policies, but at the same time, we're not trying to make the sausage with all 5 people in the room. So it's going to be somewhat of an iterative process. We're going to keep a backlog of those policies and put them out there on Jared's board update, along with all the other ones that Jamie may have minor revisions on, so that once again, everybody here is well informed about what policy is going to be talking about, and we're going to try to get through not every one possible, but the ones that we have the bandwidth to do in a reasonable amount of time. So we don't want to be guessing at what another member may want, in which case the best thing to do is then just email myself, Jared, or Jamie with anything that you have to comment on, and then we'll make sure that that gets into the discussion, and hopefully you can attend when you see that your policy that you're interested is on the agenda. And that seemed to work pretty well. And so that's a real high level, not so much about all the policies that we talked about, which happen to be communicable diseases, academic integrity, and anti-bullying. There was discussions on all those. And I think a couple of them, if I'm not mistaken,
Transportation.
I'm sorry?
Transportation.
And transportation. Did we get any into a first reading tonight?
There are 2.
Yeah, 2 of them, yeah, 2 of them. So a couple of those made it to first reading. Some of them got tabled, and we'll circle back and hit those at the next policy meeting. So that's more how we're going to run the meetings than what we talked about. You can read that in the meeting minutes if you're interested, or you can ask the questions now. And then, of course, any other board member present, feel free to comment if I missed something in that summary.
Thank you. Comments or questions on that report? Hearing none, then we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes the board meeting minutes, the board committee summaries, changes in personnel and staffing. That includes both retirements, resignations, as well as hirings, the approval of bills, the first reading of policies, and the second reading of policies. There are 8 first reading of policies on the list for this evening. Do I hear a motion on resolution 9162?
Second.
Moved by Dave, seconded by Craig. Comments or questions on the resolution? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Diana Johnson,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
Dave Smith,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Yes.
Craig Wortman.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Moving on to our two action items for this evening. The first is Resolution 9163, which is the 2022-2023 District Budget and Tax Levy. Do I hear a motion on 9163?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mike, seconded by Lori. Comments or questions on the motion? Again, I'll just reiterate, the year in which everybody's feeling the pressure. We're lowering the levy. We're lowering the mill rate. On average, we're lowering the school district part of their people's tax bill. Again, it all depends on how much your house went up compared to everybody else's. And I think, again, that's all the right thing to do for this year. Any other comments or questions on the motion?
Thank you, Mike, for you and your team. Hard work to get to this point.
All right. Roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Diana Johnson,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
Dave Smith,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Yes.
Craig Wortman.
Yes.
And the motion carries. And we have resolution 9164, installation of mats and wood chips at elementary school playgrounds. Do I hear a motion on 9164?
So moved.
Moved by Mike. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tina. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Diana Johnson,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
Dave Smith,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Yes.
Craig Wortman.
Yes.
And the motion carries. This brings us to or online that would like to address the board this time, just please raise your hand physically or electronically to be recognized, and when recognized, give your name and address for the record.
Tony,
Please
where
go
would I
ahead.
make my comments from?
You can stand wherever you like.
Ken Berg, I'm 101 Richards Avenue, Watertown, and I'm a Watertown resident. I was on your school board 12 years for being helpful to the district like you are now. I have tried to follow your budget. I know you're doing a good job in a lot of ways. I'm not here to be critical, but I just want to make a comment that I did see in looking at your budget, that state aid that you're receiving this year is over $2 million more than the previous year. And kudos for the levy going down. But again, if it's offset by state aid and outside resources that are helping to make that dollar amount for property taxpayers in Watertown lower, it's got to at least be put in the context of that. I looked at your budget, your Fund 10 budget. And again, Michael, you've got a good man there as far as your business manager, and he's very cooperative on providing information to people. I'm like way too many people, and I'm busier than I should be, and I'm not giving it the attention I'd like. But I'm a taxpayer, and I'm somebody in Watertown trying to just give you sensitivity to the fact that our city, our district is struggling in different ways that you look at as far as moving forward. And taxes are a contributing factor in people when they make decisions on where they live. So you have to always be sensitive to that as a board member, and know that that's an important factor for people that pay the bill, which is you guys and everybody else out there in our school district. We want quality education. We want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to look at those dollars critically. And, you know, when I was on this board, it wasn't anything like this as far as the size. I had two different documents that I got from your business manager. And one of them obviously did show a Fund 10 type of budget on expenditure of $52 million for this year. And when you look at it versus the last year, not on budget, but on actual expenditures for last year, the increase was about 6.9% for an increase. That's a big number, and that on the Fund 10 portion of that budget, that shows that you are spending, and all of it, I'm sure a lot of it's got clear justification, but just be sensitive to that dollar amount, and don't be misled by the fact that these outside sources of revenue are helping you do your job and give the perception of being fiscally responsible in a way that is true, but to a point. And I need to just reemphasize that, because I am not, here to be critical of education. I've increasingly become very, very appreciative of education. It's so important. It's a big factor in people making decisions about moving here for a place to live. As far as our businesses looking at their town, it's a big factor. Part of it can be focused as a priority, but equally important is to do it in a cost-effective manner so that we are squeezing dollars where we can. And when I see Fund 10 budgets are going up by that amount, I know that we're giving 4.7% increase on salary to deal with inflation. I think Watertown's doing 4%, so you're within that range of an increase in order to accommodate and offset the inflation factor. But I'm not one of these people that believe that you always got to pay people top dollar in order to keep them here. You got to create a culture. You got to create a place where people want to be here. And a lot of people, the history of Watertown, we've had a lot of administrators, a lot of people that work in our cities and in our school districts that have been here for a long time because of the culture and the contribution they're making to their entity, their governmental entity. And I did public service for 30 years, so I obviously felt good about trying to make my contribution. And I'm trying to get across to you, don't buy into that to a fault on why we have to keep moving these dollar amounts up to a point which is maybe not realistic with our district. We're not Oconomowoc, we're not Sun Prairie. We don't have those issues in our favor. We have to look at things critically. We still have to retain the right people, and we got to keep them here. And that's important, but I'm sure that the culture you create by the way you treat people and the way you do your education is going to be an important factor when people make a decision of staying here versus going somewhere else. And don't overly buy into that kind of logic, because then you're always going to be spending to a fault. And that's not necessarily, I feel, the right thing. I have followed your ESSER funds, your 7.4 million. I know you're doing things that are targeted, one-time expenditures that are capital type of needs, and you're addressing them because of our dollars we're getting from the federal government. Good job. Those are areas that we need to address because of those dollars, but be thankful. That's a one-time type of revenue source, and use them wisely until they're gone. And I know you got the committee looking at them on a continuing basis. So I think the overall point that I wanted to make is not to be misled by a levy decrease. Some of it is for all the right reasons, but I think you have some revenues that are important here. And if they're not going to be recurring, and you keep doing the spending, and these outside sources all of a sudden dry up or they're not there, then you're going to have some big levy increases at some point in time, which you're going to have to deal with as board members. So that's why you need to be on the side of being critical of expenditures, help justify them each time they come in front of you, and look at them as a priority as your job duty on that school board and as administrator, because it is important to have a quality education, but also to do it affordably.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else online?
There is not.
Okay. Then lastly, under agenda planning, I did not hear anything brought up this evening that needed to be captured for possible inclusion in a future board meeting. So again, that'll be the purpose of that item moving forward, is try and capture things as they're brought up in the course of a meeting, so we log them and then handle them appropriately at future meetings. And we'll keep that as a running list. I did not hear anything from tonight's meeting that needs to be captured there. So with no other business before the board, I will hear a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mike, second.
Second.
Second by David. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.
What happened?
I-